Key point 1. Patriarchy is the suppressor of men's capacity to love. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's a man's world. These are a few of the many inflammatory titles produced by modern culture that promote the beaten narrative. Patriarchy has burdened its claws too deep. Masculinity is the only benchmark for a man to follow, and being sensitive means, well, you've got the idea. Bell Hooks, an American social activist and writer, presents her observations about the long-established half-myth about men unwilling to change and the role of feminism in nurturing male sincerity. The primary pain of today's manhood is the incapability of love caused by a toxic patriarchal culture that forbids men to express their emotions freely. Moreover, it doesn't teach them the value of sensitivity and instead highlights the supremacy of men's power, authority, and rage as a source of inner force. Equally important, men are not alone in nurturing this narrative. Since transformations are always hard, most women find hatred an appropriate means of combating patriarchy. And yet, only the difficult road can bring us to the relationship order grounded on love, respect, and honesty. The risk is worth taking. Keep in mind, feminists are responsible for fighting for gender equality and showing men there's a pathway for reviving men's nature. Men can love, empathize, care, and be true friends. Patriarchal culture just forced them to live into oblivion for too long. With this in mind, Hooks figures out how to think about men expanding beyond the limits of toxic patriarchy. It turns out that most men are not resistant to inner transformation. Instead, they don't know how to navigate the universe of feelings, even those that may hurt them. Patriarchy doesn't issue directions on how to be a deeply caring human. Due to this tidbit, you'll discover why many women don't believe men and cannot establish an emotional connection with them. More importantly, you'll find out the reasons behind toxic masculinity and whether men genuinely do not want to change. Indeed, it takes an ocean to know yourself. However, it is never too late to get sail and start up the trail. Key point 2. A loving man, job description. It is sad to admit it, but most women live with a pathological lack of male love. They crave genuine affection, and this longing isn't limited to romantic feelings. Women starve for caring lovers, compassionate friends, empathetic coworkers, kind fathers and brothers. But the patriarchal machine generates the idea that men shouldn't demonstrate their feelings. It makes them weak. As a result, we've developed a culture where people, regardless of gender, are deficient in love, an essential nutrient for their personal growth and empathetic temper. That's because patriarchy adores promoting the real men narrative. Real men aren't soft. They don't cry, complain, or, heaven forbid, show their vulnerability. The angrier a man can get, the better. It means he is a powerful master of life. Likewise, coupled with the enthusiasm our culture demonstrates when absorbing this patriarchy-driven storyline, men are, if not prisoners of Azkaban, but very unlucky folks for sure. Add to this the old-fashioned feminism, which did no more than bellyaching male supremacy for ages and didn't aspire to get to the root cause of the issue. As a result, you'll see that remodeling manhood is one hell of a goal. Remember, patriarchy is like an evil stepmother from the Cinderella fairy tale. It doesn't care if a man is happy or not. It needs one to fit the pattern of the authority of almighty creatures who consider loving a supplement of physical desire. But here's the good news. Men crave love too. They're just in a disadvantageous position compared to women. To admit their deeply feeling nature, they should first find the tiny little thread of their sensitivity. With progressive feminists taking heart to stand against imposed principles, men have great chances to know love. Only a revolution of values in our nature will end male violence, and that revolution will necessarily be based on a love ethic. To create loving men, we must love males. Bell Hooks. Key point 3. A closer look at patriarchy. What does it mean to be a boy? One of the most thought-provoking things about patriarchy is that it exists and poisons men's minds, and at the same time, men cannot easily detect its destructive influence. This invisible matter distorts females' perceptions of manhood and pushes them away from helping men to restore their feeling selves. Most men never think about patriarchy, what it means, how it is created and sustained. Many men in our nation would not be able to spell the word or pronounce it correctly. The word patriarchy just is not a part of their normal everyday thought or speech. Bell Hooks. Patriarchy welcomes its angry sons with open arms. If a man can quickly go furious, it is a telltale sign of a properly nurtured male. This ideology doesn't tolerate alternatives for men's supremacy over women, which is considered a default function of maleness. Moreover, most men are so accustomed to this idea that they firmly believe their supremacy is what a doctor ordered for all their relationships, including romantic ones. However, it is a big misconception. Patriarchy configures men who consider themselves leaders of the pack. Their primary objective is to provide for the family, be authoritative leaders, use their power, satisfy basic desires, compete, be tough, and punish from time to time. Do you need a magnifying glass to find the L word in this sequence? Keep in mind that not knowing about patriarchy is like claiming to be apolitical. Once you decide to stay aside and not worry about who predestines your life, a new dictator ascends the throne. There will be no mistake in claiming that boyhood is a starting point of male aggression and demonstrative indifference. Men enter the world like everyone else, like creatures need love and attention. But after a while, the stony, discreet father gives a boy one look, and even an idea to express one's feelings openly provokes unbearable pain and discomfort. Being exposed to patriarchal ideology in their early years, most men are at high risk of developing mental disorders in the future. Patriarchy indeed drives them mad. Society must first recognize the errors in its ruling to overthrow a tyrant. Unless people, regardless of gender, age, and culture, won't stop pretending the patriarchy metastases permeate the entire social organism, it'll continue to mess with their lives. Thus, unified recognition of the challenge is essential for dealing with pain and suppression of men's emotional selves face. Key point 4. Roses are red, violets are blue. Patriarchy fuels violence. There's no doubt that patriarchal ideology is a driving force of males' violent behavior. The disconnection from their emotional side leaves a blank space, and instead of finding a robust moral benchmark, most men choose the simplest way to sustain their dominance. In the modern world, violence has nothing to do with biology. Women can be as savage as men. Instead, violence is a downside of ideologically ill-constructed attitudes. Male violence exists in multiple forms. It is one of the reasons pro-feminist females cannot force themselves to participate in men's emotional rehabilitation. However, domestic violence expressed by adults towards their children deserves closer attention. Manifestation of this violence implies a specific goal. Thus, men believe that through cruelty, they can affirm their authority and control those weak who cannot oppose them. It is one of the most painful bottlenecks driven by the damaging culture. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence toward women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. Bell hooks. There's no big reason to expect all men to become Prince Charming suddenly. Pop culture, media, TV, literature, and other manufacturers of social constructs have permeated our perception of maleness like coffee and amaretti-soaked Savoiardi biscuits. And what about women? They also have a raw deal, constantly stumbling on the broken dream about men who will love them. Not being afraid of feelings, they end up with stoned hearts, and the spiral of violence goes on and on. It's unbelievable how patriarchy distorts so many aspects of human life that should only bring happiness, joy, and love. Thus, when it comes to sex, patriarchy embarrassingly simplifies it. Instead of perceiving it as a cosmic blast of emotions and sensations, men consider it a physical need necessary to satisfy. In other words, according to this perspective, there's no significant difference between sex, food intake, and other natural processes. Paradoxically, the almighty patriarchal culture doesn't feel safe without creating protected spaces for affirming its supremacy and power. For example, patriarchal pornography. This island of co-thinkers is nothing more than a way of obtaining an illusion of control over women. Keep in mind, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but the patriarchy's nurtured sexuality holds many men hostages. It never lets them orchestrate their sexual selves. Did you know up to 25% of women report permanent fear of their partners? Key point 5. Men from the planet work. When we think of work as not a means for sustaining wealth, we should admit that it is nothing less than another barrier between men and love. At first glance, there's no more normal picture than a working man. He aims to financially support himself or his family and build a career and network. And here's capitalism, adding salt to the wound, leaves many males without jobs, once a backbone of patriarchy-driven self-worth. Notably, we don't mean they are numbed robots when we say men should be taught to feel, for example. Allowing the fear of letting others down consumes them when they have problems at work. Like capitalism stuck its pushy nose and redrew men's perception of work as the pillar of masculinity, Gender equality nails another nail in the coffin known as a masculinity downfall. Under those circumstances, many men lose the sentiment they persistently trump. They waste their financial authority, leverage that allows them to command others. More and more, women acknowledge their capacity to be on equal footing with men, and it's a knockout. Remember, in a feelings-less world, lots of men from low and middle class deal with engrossing gloom. The career opportunities are scarce, unemployment is approaching, and work itself ceases being indicative of male supremacy. Equally important, a depressive state provoked by problems at work is only the tip of an iceberg. Professional environments are sanctuaries for a significant part of manhood where they can be anyone they want, but not themselves. Work is where you can be a real man according to patriarchal doctrine, not a deeply feeling human. When the risk of losing employment emerges, men are petrified to lose it. Job loss will mean they must enter the real world with all its imperfections, challenges, and feelings. While sexism is still solidified in our culture, males are not aliens to feelings. They're heavy-hearted about their sex life and feel they do not belong anywhere. Thus, although job problems are a so-so trigger of changes, it gives a glimmer of hope. Sooner or later, men realize that abusive patriarchal culture engrossed their lives. And they'll need a hand to open the door of self-reinvention. But will feminist women engage in this massive manhood recovery? Let's see in the next chapter. Key point 6. A feminist woman walks into a bar. There we are, at the crossroads again. A feminist woman. How do most men perceive her? What are her relations with patriarchal order and plans regarding recovery of manhood? Well, it's not that simple. Many women pay a very high price living in a patriarchal society. Females regularly hip upon reminders of toxic maleness, from the wage gap to the impossibility of building relationships. Simultaneously, there is no chance men will change without female engagement. The point is often overlooked. The patriarchal ideology, accompanied by capitalist sentiments, turned men against women. These forces, declaring feminists as man-haters, fueled the hostility between tribes, aside from the fact that there shouldn't be any opposition between males and females in the first place. As a result, men avoid everything emerging from womanhood as fire. Since birth, men are a part of patriarchy, so men don't have to learn the system's values. They're already part of their DNA. Patriarchy is like horrible and gaudy music. You hear it from far and wide, and it's annoying. Unfortunately, sometimes garbage has good producers, and you cannot do anything about it except choose another direction or turn the radio off. Myth destruction alert. Feminists don't hate men. On the contrary, they profoundly regret that so much pain and hardship befell manhood. Moreover, bell hooks emphasizes that a consolidated attempt to help men deal with this pain has never happened. It's for feminist thinkers to introduce an alternative model of manhood liberation, not based on patriarchy. Currently, the existing blueprints don't work. Men who believe in love don't want to be seen as too soft, and it's normal. Markedly, if by some miracle a man didn't receive a detailed guide about how to be a real man, there's always popular culture that drills them into all the finest points. It accumulates a diversity of real menness signifiers. TV tells us that men can exploit physical force to establish power. Alternatively, men with female friends are portrayed as weak, gay, unsuccessful, etc. It is another great reason for feminist thinkers to take the lead in balanced refining the gender landscape of today's society if they genuinely aspire to these changes. Key point 7. To be healed, to be reinvented, to be loved. One of the best things about stories about good and evil is that the latter can be eventually defeated. To overpower, or at least dismantle the ill effects of patriarchal order and live a meaningful life, experiencing all the emotions possible, men must go through healing and reclamation of their human selves. Therefore, men need freedom and safe space to reclaim their authentic selves, the pillars that feminism carries as pure gold. Moreover, the male psychological state is a minefield. Since childhood, they grow up in a culture that normalizes abuse and absorbs patriarchal principles, including the sentiment that they cannot be loved. Thus, relearning moral blueprints and revising factors that most likely affect self-esteem will be a difficult journey. Remember, as a result of the poisonous impact of patriarchy, men are forced to participate in a never-ending masquerade, where no role they try on doesn't even remotely reflect their true selves. We should make peace that not all men are willing to change. Some believe that they lived happily ever after with patriarchy, and it is their right to think so. However, we create our lives with our choices. By refusing to change, men doom themselves never to experience true love and settle for mediocre life instead of letting their selfhood break free. And when men dare to do so with women's help, they'll discover the whole world of human emotions and feel true love because their partners won't be afraid of them anymore. They'll establish a deep connection with their children and become caring friends. Finally, they'll find out that love is their biggest strength. Conclusion. Undoubtedly, today's masculinity undergoes a severe crisis. Women are done with solving the male nature mystery sealed under lock and key. Some of them lost hope, and others experienced trauma and fear. Men and women speak different languages. The first is brainwashed by patriarchal views, while the latter often misinterpret the true goal of feminism. Thus, we deal with quasi-rational hatred and the world without men idea instead of maleness reestablishment. Besides, major economic transformations and shifts in gender roles left many men at the crossroads of their self-identification. In sexual relationships, patriarchal culture also dictates the game's rules because it convinces society to believe in its priority. However, once men reveal that sex as patriarchy interprets it doesn't equal love, they'll see the window of opportunity and rebellion. Until then, they desperately need female hearts to guide them. Thus, we all know it isn't good to be brainwashed about something. However, in the context of patriarchy's alleged importance, we see males heart-washed and soul-washed, which is even more disrupted for manhood and the global harmony of human relationships. Given that the contradiction of patriarchy feminism has exhausted itself, we must reform every constituent of human relationships. We need to review tender passion, empathy, caring attitude, and eagerness to explore each other and thrive for the chemistry of souls. Therefore, we need to give life to a culture where men would be empowered to love. Try this. Speak up. Share your stories about discomfort or trauma caused by patriarchal culture. You'll explain to your partner or friend how women perceive men's actions in reality. Similarly, clarify your vision of how a man should behave. Positive examples are vital. If a man feels lost and doesn't know where to start, familiarize him with works of feminist thinkers writing about reinventing masculinity. Often, men don't get the right idea of feminism.